a real pleasure to be here today, my first time at the conference. I think you heard this morning about big picture items facing the industry, the challenges that we are facing. And then I think in the last panel, just before we broke, got down a little bit more granular to kind of how are individual companies thinking about the challenges in drug development and how we do our work. I'm going to tell you a little story or a tale about the experience that we've had at MILLENIUM, which I think ties in a lot of the themes that you've heard: mergers and acquisitions, globalization, culture, partnerships. A lot of those themes I think you'll see illustrated in a kind of, I think, a somewhat unique situation that we've been going through over the last couple of years. So with that, so a little bit of background. So MILLENIUM is now called MILLENIUM, the TAKEDA Oncology Company. We're a fully integrated biopharmaceutical company. Our sole focus is in oncology. We have responsibility for global marketing strategy, commercial strategy, the global development function, both the strategy and the execution, and also for component of drug discovery in oncology. We were founded in 1993. We are headquartered in Cambridge, Massachusetts. We're about 1,200 employees, and I'll get into a moment a little bit about what happened in May 2008. TAKEDA is the leading pharmaceutical company in Japan. It's focused in several therapeutic areas, but several years ago, when they were thinking about their long-term strategic plan, they made the decision that they really wanted to invest more in the oncology area. They had a fairly nascent oncology presence. And to do that, they made the decision to acquire an anchor company, and that was MILLENIUM, a company that had a fully integrated discovery, development, and commercial infrastructure and experience is the way to kind of jumpstart their efforts in oncology. And it turns out that TAKEDA and MILLENIUM have a lot of things in common around the mission and the vision and the culture of the companies. So this all happened, the acquisition, in May 2008. We had one marketed product and we had about 5 molecules in development. When we were acquired by TAKEDA, they transitioned all of their existing programs to us, so we went from 4 molecules to 14 molecules in the pipeline. So a very, very major change. And also an expansion into sort of a broader tumor types. We had been primarily focused in the heme area because we had Velcade for myeloma and lymphoma, though we did trials in solid tumors, but TAKEDA had a real presence in the prostate cancer area. They had discovered and developed Lupron, and they had other molecules in the pipeline in prostate cancer as an example. And also global responsibilities. While we were always developing as a standalone company our molecules from a global perspective, it was always with the eye towards we would ultimately partner globally, and now we had to have responsibilities for worldwide development and regulatory approvals. So major, major changes. I think it's important as I tell you a little bit about the story and how we decided to approach the challenge and the opportunity that we had, was what was the mission and vision of TAKEDA for MILLENIUM and oncology. And it really was to build a leading oncology organization. That's why TAKEDA acquired MILLENIUM. And our pipeline and our goal really is on innovation. Innovation in terms of novel targets and molecules, primarily first-in-class, some best-in-class programs, a diversity of target pathways and modalities, a sizable enough pipeline to ensure that we have enough coming out the other end, as we heard this morning. And also building a very strong reputation as a science-driven, patient-oriented oncology company, something that had been at the roots of MILLENIUM all along, but something we thought was very important for success in the future. So this is the current MILLENIUM pipeline, and I just want to illustrate a few points about this. First of all, obviously, it's a lot larger than it was before. But one of the very first things that we did was go through a very rigorous portfolio prioritization process. And while there's a lot of molecules up here, not all of them are created equal. We make sure that we have high priority molecules that we invest a disproportionate amount of our resources in. I think it's a very critical component of success across the board, especially in all areas, but oncology being very important too. The other thing I want to illustrate from this slide is that the molecules on this pipeline chart come from a lot of different places. Some come from a MILLENIUM discovery organization, some from TAKEDA. Many of them are in partnerships. So we have a large partnership with Amgen around several molecules, one which is in co-development, one where we have Japan-only responsibilities. From the time that we were acquired by Takeda, we bought a company called IDM and acquired a compound for osteosarcoma that's approved in Europe, and just recently did a deal with Seattle Genetics on a very exciting novel molecule for Hodgkin's disease. So in addition to just the overall inflection of bringing this pipeline in, we've done a lot of additional business development activities, which we think is critical. And so there's not a one-size model for all the molecules, given that when things are in partnership, it creates different challenges. So what were the challenges that we faced? So roll the clock back a couple years, almost 2 years now. We had to shift this, what was a small biotech company to focus from local to global development, dealing with many more complex set of interfaces. Although we were an autonomous business unit, we still had interfaces at the discovery level with the rest of Takeda, and also on the commercial level, because Takeda will actually market and sell the drug outside the US, our oncology programs. It was very important for us to preserve the small company culture. We thought that it was very important. We had very strong integration at MILLENIUM as a standalone across research and development. We thought it was a real source of competitive advantage in the oncology space. And we wanted to figure out how are we going to handle all this work coming forward, at the same time preserve that core of who we were, the cultural, the entrepreneurialism, and the integration. We needed to rethink the capabilities that were required, the capacity necessary, and also to achieve the scalability in conducting clinical development. And so I thought we had a pretty unique opportunity, and we had, I think, what I would call a relative blank slate, in that we didn't have a large number of existing partnerships, we didn't have existing processes in the way that people worked that we had to kind of break up. I mean, we had some of that, so by no means, and I'll go into this in a moment, was this an easy task to rethink how we wanted to do our work, but relative to a lot of other companies, we didn't have a lot of existing legacy and existing structures that were going to be hard to break up, which I know are quite challenging. And we did decide to engage an outside firm, BCG, that really helped us on what we would call the new sourcing vision, because this was really all about how are we going to scale our work, how are we going to do our work differently. So this was the redesign project that we did, and this is just to illustrate, this was really focused on clinical development, both early and late development. It spanned everything from clinical development strategy all the way through to report writing, and it went through all the major functions within the clinical organization. And we looked at resources and capabilities and org structures and interfaces. The framework that we used was really as follows. We said everything is on the table in terms of what we would do internally versus externally. And what we wanted each function to do is to go through the whole value chain for their given tasks and to determine whether that particular task was innovative, customized, or standardized. And this allowed us to have a sort of a common language and a framework by which to think about the kinds of work that we do. And it was very useful. It kind of was able to get people to step back from, well, I don't want, this can't go on the outside, or it can or can't, to saying, okay, let's really try to define what the task is. And this is an example, and you won't be able to read it, I'm just going to tell you, we mapped across the classification, across the value chain. And what you can see, maybe from the back is the dark green are those things that we said were innovative. And we made the decision that the innovative work is things that we really wanted to retain primarily internally. And those really were on clinical development, strategy development, on a biomarker translation from discovery to development, and biomarker strategy, on input from biostats into clinical development plans, and some input into the protocols. And also vendor relationships, because we knew as we were going to move towards this different model that a very critical, innovative function was going to be how we managed our partnerships. But virtually everything